Welcome to When You Are the Sandwich. Are you balancing the responsibilities of caring for your aging parents as well as your own children? These can be stressful times, and we're here to help. This podcast is your guide to smoother sailing in the midst of the sandwich generation's balancing act, discussing informative topics to help ensure order in the midst of potential chaos.
Hi, everyone. I'd like to welcome Holly Colby as a guest today. Holly is the founder and owner of Adaptive Moving Solutions, LLC. Holly had a successful career in marketing and project management for over 20 years before leaving the corporate world behind to find more meaningful work. Having located many times in her life, cleaned out the homes of her loved ones who have passed away, and assisted many friends and family in relocating, she has extensive firsthand experience with the entire process and the emotions associated with these life events. Understanding that these projects can be incredibly time-consuming and emotional, Holly leads with empathy with every client she works with. Her goal is to make life easier for those who work with her. Holly's approach to where there's a will, there's a way helps her clients, friends, and family in providing solutions to make their lives easier. Holly, welcome.
Thank you, Tiffany. It's great to be here.
Now, Holly, I want to start us off with saying, as we are aging, there are many things that we don't know or we need to consider when it might be time to move. And so there might be a place where someone has lived for decades, right? It's not unusual for for my law firm to encounter clients who have lived in their homes for 50 plus years. So what are some situations that you are seeing where someone needs to make a move from where they've lived?
So in my experiences, I've witnessed a few different scenarios in which people would need to relocate with regard to our aging demographic. They're moving to a senior living community. They are, just because they're unable to maintain their current home. Maybe it's too big. Maybe their health is declining and it's no longer safe for them. Maybe they're just isolated and, maybe their spouse has passed away and moving into a community would give them a little bit more support. I've seen seniors move into nursing homes. There comes a time where they've aged in their home as long as they can, and they move into nursing homes or assisted living where they need a little bit more assistance with their day-to-day life. And I also encounter some situations where families move their aging parents closer to home, whether it be in a condo or an in-law apartment, so that they're closer for them, so that they can have that support from the family.
Yeah, and I have to say that, we've experienced where clients will try to see if they can move their parent to be in the same state, let alone nearby, right? And so
That's correct.
They might have had to have moved, and now in order to be able to be there and be able to support, they need to move them a lot closer.
That's right. Yes, that's one situation that is I'm seeing more and more prevalent, is that the adult child lives states away, and they need support close by, whether it's helping them with having an advocate there if a serviceman needs to come by for their home, or if it's getting them ready to prepare them to that life transition to relocate.
Got it. So now, having that in mind, what are challenges that you're currently seeing with the clientele that you're working with?
Oh boy. So we're talking about a demographic, the golden agers, I'd like to call them. So I call them the aging population in the golden agers. A few of the biggest challenges is that they've lived in their homes for so long. You mentioned 20, 30, 40 years. I had a client that lived in his home for 60 years and he built his own home. So if you can imagine, when you were building your home in your family, you acquire things throughout the years. And these people have had very rich and fulfilling lives, and they have traveled the world, they've raised their families, and they've acquired a lot of things, right? A lot of possessions, whether it's going to be their children's toys from childhood, or their children's clothing because it's so cute. Even little pieces when they travel, they take all of these memorabilia with them, and all of that amounts to great deals of stuff. Right. So in addition, to papers and all of that, when you start to factor in when people are aging, they slow down a little bit, and maybe they don't have the initiative to clean up or to declutter their homes or to shred all the paperwork that they might need someday. We're also talking about a demographic that, was raised through wartime, and people collect things because they're afraid of not having it, or they bought things at a low price once upon a time, thinking that these items would be valuable for their children or their grandchildren. So it's really one of the biggest challenges is being the collector of all the things. And I think that we can all relate to having a family member, whether it's an uncle, an aunt, a grandmother, a grandfather, even our parents, as we age, they collect things. And at the end of the day, yes, you don't really think about where you can dispose or donate or sell these things. So that's where we come in to try to help people disperse this type of possession and free the senior from that.
That makes a lot of sense. And something that we hear from, again, for my law firm, that we hear is that sometimes people are afraid to move because of all that stuff.
It's very overwhelming. I mean, I can tell you that anything from collections of the Hummels dolls, Beanie Babies. I've got clients that collect China, Cabbage Patch dolls. They just don't know what to do with it. Yeah. And they don't know where to start. So they're so overwhelmed. And what happens when you're overwhelmed? You shut down, right? And you just don't deal with it. And you just carry on with your everyday. So there are options, right? There are options for you, for these individuals, for the family members, to help them declutter their homes so that, one, you clear some of the energy up, some of the noise, so it just starts to feel a little bit better, make room for more memories. But then we can help with either selling items, you can donate them, you can try to get some money back with those items.
Yeah, and I'm amazed at it. Well, at some things which I've learned, at least currently as of the taping for this recording, my understanding is that fine china generally doesn't have much value, because we're actually, on the personal side, we're still dealing with trying to clean out great grandparents' fine china. But that being the case, things that you wouldn't think about may have value.
Right. Right. And, it really does depend. There are a few things that our seniors keep. Fine china is one of them. There's also something else that's related to brown furniture. I don't know if you've heard about this at all. So you've got these impeccably kept, beautiful wood pieces of furniture that have been, they're 30, 40 years old, china cabinets, dining room tables, that sort of thing. There's no market for brown furniture. So a lot of these pieces, wind up, if they can't be donated, they wind up in landfills. And it's really sad because the younger generations aren't as in tune with the quality of the wood, but the color of it, right?
Interesting. And again, for those that are listening in, if you're listening into this years after we've done this recording, brown furniture may now be back in style. Who knows?
Right. That's very true.
It happened. But at least as of the recording for this, it is definitely not in style for getting. I get that. So I want to now shift us a little bit, because actually I do think it's beyond the scope of this particular podcast to talk about the the emotions and the psychological feelings that people are going through when it's time to transition. So I think for our podcast today, we really want to kind of focus on really helping the listener with once you can talk with that elder. Or I like that, once the golden age, I like that. So once you can talk with your parent to really help them know that it's time to move. And this is really more, they're now ready to start thinking on that versus that you really have to try to help them. We'll have a whole separate podcast that will go into the psychology behind that. So that being the case, are there any other compounding issues, Holly, that you've seen? Because really, when you guys are coming in, they've recognized that they need to make a move, correct?
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. And so knowing that, we talked about, all this stuff. I'm also assuming that we now know where someone is moving to. Is that pretty much the case? I mean, once you are retained, they know where they're going to be going to?
Yes, for the most part. There are times when I'm brought in a little bit earlier in the process, just to provide a little bit of guidance and to give them some resources that they can work with usually with the adult child of the golden ager, so that they have a little bit of guidance and they know how to navigate the process, because not everyone knows how to navigate this. This is not something that you learn growing up. And then, from there, there's a few things when they are actually moving, when they're moving into a community or downsizing into a smaller townhouse or something, assisted living. One thing to think about is that nobody likes change, right? We're talking about a generation, especially if you've lived in your house for 30, 40 years, they're not comfortable with change. So we can't expect people to be gung-ho ready. Now, granted, there are some individuals and some clients that we've worked with that are like, I'm ready. I'm going to go move to the senior living community. I'm going to treat it like a floating cruise, right? It's going to be my floating cruise. We're going to go do bingo. We're going to drink drinks. We're going to do arts and crafts. But, overall, people in general don't like change. And then that fear of change really is exasperated with everything that needs to happen right before they move in there. What am I going to do with all of the things that I've collected over the years? I don't know. I've got all of these collections. I've talked to my daughter. She doesn't want it. I've talked to my son. He doesn't want the stuff. What do I do? How do I clean out my home? So, a few things have to happen there, with whether it's getting rid of the belongings, finding a mover, packing up your items and unpacking your items, and, ultimately finding the new place to live. But ideally that would have been accomplished prior to bringing us in.
Yeah, and that makes sense for our discussion today. And so where does one start? And actually, what I'd like to do, because I think there's two different time periods where one could start.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to propose that the best time to start is before you even said you're going to make the move. But that being the case, and again, since this is geared to help someone with helping for their parent, where would, like, if I were doing it to try to help my parent, do I try to start helping them declutter years before move? What would you recommend?
I don't know that there's any fixed time in advance. But yes, I mean, ideally, if the sooner the better. If you have a longer lead time that you can start to pare down items, it would help. But I think that there's also some value in doing it in a shorter period, because they're feeling a little bit more pressured to say, okay, I have to make a decision. And again, that's not an easy decision to make. You could take 3 years, you could take 3 months. It really depends on the individual and how closely tied they are to their possessions and how their family support is structured. It really does depend. There's so many variables that go into one when they're preparing to move. But yes, lead time is great. But if you can, try to donate, give to the grandchildren as early as possible, and really think about it. If I haven't used these items, or if I haven't used that china set, or I haven't looked at those Hummels dolls because they've been in boxes for years, maybe it's time to part with them.
Yeah. And now, would you agree though that it probably lead time would be better than say 3 weeks? So we just talk 3 years, 3 months, 3 weeks. That kind of gets into rash, particularly decisions that might
That's
happen.
getting into rash decisions, yes. So I would think a longer lead time. And the reason I say that is because a lot of times too, dealing with this demographic, they hide things in the houses. So you can't control what you can't control. If you only have 3 weeks, you can work with that. Working with the right partner, you can work with that. But oftentimes we are finding that a lot of our golden agers have been stashing little valuables throughout their homes. And so by having a little bit more time to thoughtfully go through the clothing, or thoughtfully go through the drawers, even the boxes, the paperwork, you'd really be surprised the little gems that you find in there.
Well, where was the strangest spot that you actually found something so far?
That is a really good question. I've had some really unique clients. I had one client who didn't really have a filing system. She was using plastic bags for her filing system, and within each of those plastic bags was paper wrapped in rubber bands. And within the papers wrapped in rubber bands were envelopes, just bills and bank statements. But then every couple of pieces of mail, we would find little envelopes with a little sticky note on it. And in that sticky note and in that envelope was $20 bills. So we found over $10,000 in cash kind of sprinkled throughout the house, stuffed in these bundles of bills, and something that you would have just tossed away.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, we've heard people say inside books, under the mattress or in the mattress. It's how deep you need to go for searching things. But that said, it does happen, especially with uh, this generation where they were really trying to make sure that things were safe.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing that too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, as we kind of wrap up our discussion today, and again, to help that adult child with helping their parent, are there any kind of final thoughts from you on how, from your standpoint, should they, and again, Holly, you have a whole business that is focused on helping people move. I highly recommend for anyone that can afford it, you should be hiring someone like Holly to help you because it really does help streamline. What would you recommend for the folks that can't get the parent to allow them to hire someone like you to help? Where would you recommend that they start in helping clear things out?
That's a really good question, because there are often times when the adult parent, the aging parent, doesn't necessarily work well with the child. So I think it really is based on the strength of that relationship, and talking about the why it's important to start paring these items down, and doing it in a dignified fashion, right? Treating the parents' possessions and their memories, ultimately their memories, with dignity and respect. Just understanding that these are people's lives. These are their memories. These are the things that they have kept for a reason, because a lot of these physical possessions are tied to memories. And so when I would recommend that an adult child would just go about it with compassion and being respectful of the parent. And I realize that it's not always that easy, because sometimes we get frustrated with our own parents, and vice versa. The parents get frustrated with us, but it's just so important to look at things through the lens of the adult parent, of the golden ager, understand or try to empathize where they're coming from, and then start working through room to room, little bits at a time, going through their possessions with your loved one. It could be a great bonding experience for you to go through and start making those decisions together and on their behalf.
Holly, thank you so much for talking with me today on this topic. I know I pulled some tips from this. I have a feeling that listeners that are listening in on this have as well. Please know that there are resources out there that can assist you. And so whether you're local here in Massachusetts and where Holly is located, or you're in other states, there are professionals that are out there that can help you. And then just know that step by step, taking it step by step and realizing that it's not going to happen in a day. It's going to take a little bit of time. So Holly, thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time today.
And thank you as well to all those who are listening in. I hope you all have a good rest of the week.
We are happy to be sponsored by O'Connell Law. To learn more about what they do, visit o'connelllawgroup.com.